So, and welcome all to the audience from near and far. So, tonight's presentation is as much as I can fit into an hour on what I think I understand about Victoria's peregrine falcons, and in particular, we'll show some specific interesting highlights of the pair at 367 Collins in Melbourne CBD. So, without further ado, let's start the presentation. This will just be a series of slides tonight. So this is the topics we're going to cover: some basic biology, how to age and sex birds from a distance, what their nesting strategy is, what different nest types they use, the value of nest boxes, a brief history of 367 Collins, a little bit about the webcam and Facebook group, urban diet of a bird-eating raptor, the nesting boxes that we used at 367 Collins, and some talk about how males and females share incubation duties that we discovered as a result of the webcam at 367 Collins. And then lastly, natal dispersal, the patterns and distances and directions that nestlings move to fledglings when they're leaving peregrine falcon nests. So first of all, distribution. Peregrine falcons are found pretty much right across Victoria, and this is a very rough map of all the known sites that myself and my volunteers and people before me have discovered across the state. And you'll notice with the symbol, well, this is a topographic map, the very dark brown are the Alps, and then the light pale yellow are the coastal areas, and the northern low-lying areas and up into the Mallee. You'll notice in the legend that there are different types of nesting sites, which we'll go into a bit more detail about. But most notably, up in the Mallee in the northwest, there's a whole lot of these upside down black triangle stick nests, and that's because there's no cliffs. And I also believe that there are a lot more tree hollows along the Murray than I've indicated here. So this is a sample and indication of the spread of the nestings and the adaptability of this species. So if there's no cliff and you're a bird hunting specialist and you don't like to commute very far, then you're going to have to put your nest somewhere where the prey is and on something other than a cliff. Hence, they've moved into stick nests in these low-lying, relatively flat areas. In the more hilly areas, lots of cliff sites, and also a number of those grey diamonds where they're moving into buildings which are artificial cliff. So that's a quick summary, just the scope of where they are. Now, this doesn't indicate every nest in the state, it's only the ones we know about. So the Victorian peregrine, or Australia's peregrine, is a subspecies. There's about 17 of them found across the globe. They occur everywhere apart from Antarctica and New Zealand. New Zealand has its own New Zealand falcon, which looks like a cross between a brown falcon and a peregrine anyway. So peregrine falcons, Falco peregrinus macropus. Macro meaning large and pus meaning foot. So these are the big-footed falcons, or the Ronald McDonald of peregrine falcons. This is a big bruising female that I banded as a nestling, and you can see her bands. This bird's about 9 years old, quite old for a peregrine falcon. So first thing about all raptors is the females are always larger than the males. And this is called reverse sexual dimorphism. It's reverse because it's the opposite of all birds. Normally, the male is larger. And so one way of confirming this is true, we can look at body weight. Males tend never to get over 700 grams, and an adult female that is lighter than 700 grams is in a really bad way. And also the wing length, which is the wing chord, is actually shorter in adult males than it is in females. So this is a species that has a high level of dimorphism, where they don't overlap in these two key metrics, the size and the weight. This difference starts in the nest. So this is a graph built up based on over 1,000 nestlings that myself and my volunteers of the Victorian Peregrine Project measured right across Victoria over 20 years. We took one measurement from each nestling. So you've got wing length across the bottom, and you've got a weight on the vertical axis. The blue dots are males, the reds are females, and 9 centimeters, which is wing length, which is about 13, 14 days old, roughly. They're starting to become distinguishable between the males and the females. So right in the nest, you can pick the size difference. This is really important because the females need a larger band than the males. You don't want to get the sex wrong and put a male band on a female. It may cause some troubles later in life. So yeah, so this is birds of prey. Females always larger than males. And not only are the size differences between the sexes, but with all birds of prey, they will have a juvenile plumage phase, which distinguishes them from adults, and they hold this for the first 2 years of life. So this male on the left is one that I banded down on the surf coast. This is about a month after leaving the nest. So it's got a similar sort of dark hood, dark wings, but on the front, it's got this tannin, milk coffee stained sort of front with these vertical splotches, whereas the male on the right, it's a charcoal, almost black hood, almost a white bib. Its crop is full. It's had a feed, so it's not wanting to fly, and you can see that white bulge, which is the crop. And beneath that are these horizontal fine bars on a light pastel grey background. So, similar shape, identical shape, but that plumage is really different. This is really important. If raptors are by nature territorial, and if you're just a goofy, daggy sort of teenager that's only a couple of months out of the nest, and you're just cluelessly flying around, you don't want to be attacked by every peregrine adult that sees you. And they won't, because they can see the coloration, the difference in the patterning, and they'll go, right, okay, I don't have to kill this thing. I'm going to chase it off, but I don't need to kill it. Whereas if it's looking like me, it's another adult, then job's on. There's going to be trouble, and they'll chase it off with a fair degree of tenacity. And they mean business. Penny Olsen records seeing nesting female peregrine falcon, seeing a wheat-tailed eagle fly in the valley below her, several hundred meters away, and decided we'll have none of that. And the female got up, flew up high, dove down onto the wedge-tail and killed it at the end of the dive, and left it to fall out of the sky, and then flew back to the nest. So it gives you an idea of A, how territorial they are, and B, how valuable this difference in plumage is between adults and juveniles. Because they've got all the wherewithal to, kill another thing, particularly a bird, because that's what they specialize in, hunting other things that fly. So one of my students years ago took this photo of a female peregrine doing a barrel roll as she's coming down to have another go at trying to strike me as I'm abseiling down to the nest to measure or tag chicks. Which we sometimes do in the nest because it's a lot safer for us and the nestlings. They don't always hit, but when they do, that's about 900 grams of angry peregrine coming at you at about 60 kilometres an hour. So I don't care how good your helmet is, it's not pleasant for either of us. So I love the intensity of this shot, even though she's rolled over onto her back and is coming down. The eyes are staring straight at the thing that she's most pissed off about. And on this occasion, it's me. So, peregrine falcons, you'll hear a lot about nesting, where they'll nest and where they won't and what they'll do. So in essence, they dig a scrape on hopefully a flat, level ledge on a cliff and lay their eggs. And as you can see in this particular nest, these are 3 eggs in northeast Victoria. They haven't even bothered to clean out the bones from the last few years of their prey items. They've just scattered those around and dug a bit of a scrape and popped the eggs in, and that's as much as they do. This seems like a fairly ineffective nesting strategy. However, remember, peregrines have been around since the Pleistocene, and seabirds do the exact same strategy. They nest in the sand, usually above the high tide mark as a rule, and dig a scrape and pop their eggs into it. The difference is these things like to be about 200 metres above sea level, whereas seabirds are happy to be about 20 centimetres above high tide mark. One of the limitations of this nesting strategy, however, is drainage, water runoff and accumulation in the nest. Now, this is a clutch of 4 eggs, which is the maximum size we find in Victoria. It had rained that winter. It was a wet winter. I think this might have been 95, but don't hold me to that. And the nest has since dried out, and the eggs are stuck there and not looking at all healthy. And of course, none of those will hatch. They haven't survived. So this is a key weakness in their strategy. Also, the accessibility to predators on occasion can be an issue. So in Victoria, it's been very interesting. About 60% of the nests, or 59%, are found on cliff faces. About 10% are on some sort of built structure, building. And then about 15 to 16% have been found either in tree hollows or stick nests. So there's this huge diversity of nesting types or situations that they'll move into. They won't build a nest. That scraping of a scrape is all they do. So they know what a stick nest is, and it's a bit like me. I know what a house is, but I'm not sure I could build one. And peregrines are the same way. They know what a stick nest is. They just can't build one. And unlike me, they make really lousy tenants because they tend to just trash it until it falls apart and then move on and steal another nest some other time, somewhere else in some other location. Whereas with the cliff nests that they use, they don't trash those because they can't. And so I have found pigeon bands from racing pigeons on inside nests stamped with the year of birth of the pigeon. And I've got the oldest ring in Australia of 1897. So that site had been used continuously for 120 years from when that first pigeon was found, and probably used for many generations beforehand. So this is a typical cliff nest, a nice overhang, bit of shelter, and this is about 75 metres up off the ground. So generally 25 metres high, and all nests, not just these nests, all nests, I shouldn't say all, but most of them are found less than 1 kilometre from water, either the coast or lakes or rivers. And this is because in Australia, if you want biodiversity, just add water. And if you're interested in feeding on waterfowl or parrots or just about anything, there'll be more of those near water than there will long distances from water. So hence, these things like to have a nest site somewhere near water. Some of the more unusual sites, this isn't a particularly unusual one. This is on the coast, and that's me going up or down, I can't remember now, on my little shoestring, my nylon shoestring that they sell to me, calling it a climbing rope, but sometimes it feels less than that. This is a classic cliff face, again, near water by a river. My climbing friend is circled in blue there, so you get a sense of just how remote and difficult and challenging some of these sites are to get into, which is on purpose, of course. And then, of course, built structures. This is Loy Yang Power Station, and you can see in the top right-hand corner the female flying off. She can't get in at me, which is terrific, and they're nesting on this I-beam. And they're having trouble hatching eggs because, as I said before, they'll lay their eggs in a scrape in the coal dust. They weren't hatching because the I-beam is acting as a heat sink. It's taking all the heat out of the eggs, and they weren't hatching. So on my way to Loy Yang from Ashburton, where I was visiting my folks, hard rubbish collection, there was a kid's school desk. I grabbed a drawer from that, and there was a bag of fish tank gravel, so I grabbed that as well. And that's all you need to make a peregrine falcon nest box. Very high science. This took us many years to discover this. And of course, this one was filed under E to F, from eggs to falcons. And the crowd goes mild. So other unusual nesting sites on built structures, obviously quarry cliffs are one, but you know, grain silos, power plants, the old top left-hand corner, this is a loading crane at the old Point Henry aluminium smelter near Geelong. This crane is on a pier that runs for about 1 kilometre, and it would run up and down. And so they tried to nest on the stairwell one year, and the workers didn't like that because they were being harassed every time they walked past them. And they failed to hatch because it's on a metal surface, usual story. So on the other side of the crane, out of everyone's way, we put up this nest box. But this only worked because I also said, make sure where they tried to nest, you put some large boulders, you know, preferably something 80, 90 centimeters in diameter, piled them up in a bit of a pyramid. And the workers said they spent 2 weeks trying to move those boulders, the birds did, and eventually they gave up and disappeared. And I came back about 2 months later, and sure enough, they'd moved into the nest box and they were on eggs by that stage. And nobody had noticed that they'd gone there. They just kept really quiet and just went about their business, but nobody was harassing them either. So it worked for everybody concerned. But it must have been unusual, you know, flying out there if you're the male with some prey and the tower's moved 1 kilometre away and you've got to lug this dead thing another kilometre. So you get sick of that after a while, I'm sure. And of course, we have tree nesting falcons, particularly rare old specimen here. So the first group in tree hollows, mostly in river redgum or forest redgum, down in Gippsland, the Bairnsdale Plains. Bottom right hand, you can see an old redgum that was ring barked during the 30s. This is me climbing up the tree about 17 metres to where the nest is. It's been circled, thinking to myself, as a volunteer, I am not getting paid enough to do this. So they are using these hollows wherever they can find them in large old trees. And then stick nests, a variety of scenarios. Some of them are using ravens' nests on different, you know, towers and the like, and they get a year out of those and then move on to something else. The bottom right-hand corner is a wedge-tailed eagle's nest, got a massive structure, and the peregrines use that. They'll use it until it falls apart or into disrepair, and then they'll go off and find another one. They won't exclude wedge-tails from the nest. They won't attack them and take over the nest. They'll just wait until, you know, wedge-tails usually have 2 or 3 nests in a territory, and they'll move around for reasons that I don't fully understand yet. And the peregrines will just find one that isn't being occupied that particular season. And the top right-hand corner is a very rare scenario where we've got 5 female nestlings in one nest. So it does occur, but this is a very rare scenario, which we won't talk much about, where there were 2 females in attendance. And I think it was the mother and a daughter from a previous season, just tolerating each other's existence, sitting on eggs, 1 on 2, 1 on 3 eggs. And then they hatch them all out, and then they had all these female young to produce and feed. So we've talked a lot about banding. Essentially, it saves us having to trap them. We can read the bands with a good telescope like this and get both of the pairs identified from 50, 100 metres away within 20 minutes, and then go on to the next site. Normally in the Northern Hemisphere, they retrap adults at nests to identify bands or to put bands on them. And you have to allocate 1 day per nest site. So this method we've developed is a heck of a lot more effective. So this is a female from previous seasons at 367 Collins. And you can quite clearly see the blue band on her left talon and the code as she's flying past, hoping to menace me on another swoop. So we've spoken a little bit about nest boxes, particularly in urban scenarios or on built structures, where if we put in a well-drained substrate, a nest box, the birds will do everything else. We have to do nothing else. We don't have to captive breed them or do any of that stuff or teach them how to hunt or any of that guff. We just have to provide a secure, well-drained nest site, and they'll do the rest. So we've done that at a number of sites, and so prior to putting the nest box in, the hatch rate at these particular sites was about 33%, one in 3 eggs, 1 in 3 clutches. The statewide average is about 2/3 or 66% for the same period of time. And once we put the nest box in and they adopt it, the hatch rate goes up to about 80%. So this was about 20 sites over many years, both pre and post. So it illustrated to me that, you know, for this particular species, the conservation action is improving the quality of the nest sites, particularly in these urban or built structures, which is what happened at 367 Collins. This is me 14 years ago. After banding, someone from the media took this photo because they love the action shots. So the nest boxes in Collins Street were just a wooden tray with some sand, and eggs were laid in them by the birds, and they bred with those for about 30 years before we replaced them in 2020. So a brief summary of Collins Street timeline here. Birds were first discovered in 1991 when they were refurbishing the building. They laid them in that same gutter, but there was no nest box, so they failed to hatch. The next year, actually, the department, independent of me, put in the nest boxes and resulted in the first successful breeding. They put one in at each end of that ledge. I recommended that because they do like a choice. And then the following year, a closed circuit television camera was installed, relaying live footage without sound down to the foyer of the building. And I used to lug my large screen TV that I bought into Collins Street once a year for about 6 weeks and put it up on a display stand. And some people may remember going there just to look at Peregrine Falcons. And we started banding the year after. The nestlings, we used to run press conferences, and some people can remember those. Most people can't, which is fine, just as well. And then in 2016, Merribek established a webcam and the live stream. And then independently of me, somebody set up the 367 Falcon Watchers Facebook group and asked me to join as the resident bird nerd, which I happily did. And I put out a Falcon fact sheet, usually once a week around the weekend, talking about what's happening, putting it into context at that stage of breeding, and also any statewide figures that are relevant to what's occurring. And then in 2022, people may remember the earthquake, the Victorian earthquake, which I had someone from The Guardian call me saying, you know, this clip of the male sitting on the eggs responding to the earthquake. So the building shaking, the male's looking around, stands up, walks to the end of the ledge, looks around a bit further as the quake continues, and then flies off. It goes for about 10, 12 seconds. So The Guardian grabbed a copy of that clip, posted it on their website. They had 186 million views in 7 days, which gives people some idea of the international attention this species seems to attract. And in 2022, we had 46,000 members. This year, we're up around 47,000 members, and people can, it's a private group, but people are welcome to join it. It's a very well-behaved group. We're really interested in people being polite and respectful, and we're a bit nerdy because we're really just interested in the birds at Collins Street. So we're not sort of that fussed about anywhere else in the world, to be perfectly honest. And many of those people are watching here tonight, I believe. So more about 367 Collins. This is a summary of just the range of species that have been recorded, taken over the last 3 seasons as prey throughout the nesting period. So there's quite a diversity of things from waders to parrots to honey eaters, and obviously miners and the like. And then amongst the introduced species, starlings, house sparrows, and rock dove or pigeons, racing pigeons. So the bulk of the diversity comes from native prey and a very small number of introduced species in total. But if you look at biomass, that is the weight of prey items, not the number of species, but the number of individuals. And this graph shows a very different story, that even though there's a larger diversity of native species taken, they make up a much smaller proportion of the prey. Most of the prey items being brought in, more than 3/4, are in fact introduced species that are in high abundance in urban areas. And peregrine falcons, they're a predator, they're opportunistic, and essentially, if it flies, it dies. They're not terribly fussed. I've seen males in the high country taking cicadas in spring when they've had a very early start to spring and summer. And I've seen a female peregrine take down a white ibis. She can't carry it, it's too heavy to carry, but was able to kill it and ride it to the ground. So they will tackle prey much bigger than themselves when they can. And they will carry things equal to their weight and slightly heavier, things like black ducks and that sort of thing. So many people 2 years ago when we put in, or last year and the year before when we put in the newer nest boxes, there's this weather wall, and then this odd looking perch, which was some indoor climbing gym handholds that I've modified. Gave them a couple of different shapes to choose from, and everyone was sort of questioning whether they ever used it. I'm just showing that's what I'm talking about. That's the female in the foreground sleeping. The camera that's aimed at her is infrared, so she can't see. She's not being disturbed by what looks like a light bouncing off the wall behind her. It's just infrared. This is in near darkness. The actual conditions of visible light that you and I operate in. And this is the male using one of the perches during the day, and some four-week-old nestlings in the foreground, looking a bit windswept and interesting, shall we say. So I was kind of pleased to see they actually do use the net, and they do use that roost at night as well. So now I thought I'd talk about incubation, which is something that prior to the webcam being installed, and also just briefly on the webcam, this is the only site in Victoria that there is a webcam. There's monitoring at a lot of other sites, but this is the only one with that feature. A lot of people are surprised to discover that, but if they understood the expense, the time cost, and the logistics, they'd realise, yeah, one's enough. So throughout the 24-hour period, and for a full incubation season of 30, 40 days in total, the males spend about 25% of their time incubating, which is still more than I thought they actually did. And the females do the bulk of it. They're much larger, certainly with a clutch of 4 eggs like they've currently got in Melbourne. You'll see how much more easily she can cover all of the eggs compared to the male. So that would explain why at night she spends 90% of the time on the eggs, and the male only a small amount, a small percentage, maybe nesting, maybe incubating a bit after sunset, and maybe starting a little bit earlier before sunrise in that dusk sort of period. But mostly in those cooler temperatures part of the day, namely nighttime, you need the bigger thermal mass that a female can bring to the job. So that's one of the advantages of having females bigger than males. One bird, not person, is better at incubating than the other. Then during the day shift, we discovered with a bit of citizen science in 2021 that the male put in nearly half of the daylight hours on the eggs. And this completely blew me away. This is a new discovery. I was surprised by this. I had always thought during the day they'd be spending similar amounts of time as they do at night. He still brings up most of the food. However, the female has to get off the eggs and do a small amount of hunting, and also just to stay fit, because once the chicks get to a certain size and there's too many mouths to feed and too much prey needs to be brought in, it can be too much for the male. Remembering he's only about 2/3 the size of the female, so she needs to be fit throughout the breeding season and can't afford to lose condition just because she's sitting on eggs. As admirable and important as that task is, it can't outweigh, the task she's got to do later in the breeding season. So they have this really neat shared duties throughout the incubation period, particularly during the day. And this is just a quick grab of the last couple of weeks of the 2021 breeding season, where you can see the males on the bottom, the blue bars, the percentage of each day during daylight hours when he was incubating, and the orange is the female's effort. So, that adds up to roughly 50-50. The last day, the 29th, however, once the eggs start hatching, she really pushes him out and says, no, I need to be here for this. And all the eggs hatched on the one day, and she was there for the bulk of that. He brought some food, and in fact, he actually fed one of the nestlings soon after it hatched. But most of that really critical time where they need constant temperature and humidity regulation, the female wants to be around for that. And that's 50%. Just a little bit more on incubation duties. This was on a clutch of 4 eggs, and looking at the duration. During the day, the maximum cumulative hours a male has spent is nearly 9 hours, 7.8 hours. He's averaging about 6 during the day, and he's doing on average about 3.5 incubation stints every day during daylight hours. And then the other question a lot of people ask is, okay, so the male's doing half of the incubating, and there's a number of periods during the incubation period, people get concerned, no one's attending the eggs. They're completely unattended. And again, using some of the citizen science we've collected over the last couple of years, particularly last year, I grabbed the data and worked out, okay, this table's purely about the time where they've been unattended. And the maximum is just over 12 hours, 12 hours and 2 hours, sorry, and 12 minutes. Unattended. That year, all 4 eggs hatched. The average hour the total hours per day averages. The maximum is 4 hours, nearly 4.5 hours. So, that's a series of periods of unattended eggs added together came to 4.5 hours. So the maximum duration is really interesting to see that they can tolerate that much time without being incubated. And the maximum number of times in a day is 18, where there was neither adult present. So they're reasonably robust, the eggs. And so I just put these figures up so that people can feel calm in the knowledge that these things know what they're doing, and we just have to deal with our own fear, not theirs, basically. So yeah, they're the figures. So the last brief section in this presentation is talking about, where did the birds go? So we've spoken about different nest types. We've spoken about the fact that there is, the opportunity for birds to nest in something different from what they were hatched in. So I had about 130 odd birds that we banded as nestlings and then turned up as breeders. And I was like, that's always exciting when that happens. It's like, okay, based on the banding. So, this is all these blue numbers, the ones that have fledged from one type of nest and then found breeding in the exact same type, which you would think, that makes sense. And one of the questions was, is this, are they imprinted? Do they only ever do this? Do they only go from a cliff to a cliff, or a tree hollow to a tree hollow? Well, nature's never quite that simple. And in fact, these red numbers that I've shown are what we call adaptive dispersals, adopting or adapting to something novel, something different from what they were raised in, demonstrating that they're not imprinting on the sort of nest type that they were raised in, which makes sense. Otherwise, how did they ever move in a tree stick nests or hollows in the first place? They must have adapted somehow or another. So these adaptive dispersals represent about a third, 31% of all the dispersals we've recorded, about 130 odd. So it's much more common than was thought. Other parts of the world believe that they imprint and you can't get a bird breeding in a cliff to move into a stick nest. Well, we've got a bunch of them doing that. So it does happen. And I think that's just solved one of the mysteries of this species. The other thing people recall, the females are larger than males, this reverse sexual dimorphism. And we have a bunch of females that we've banded as nestlings, and then we found where they've moved to. And these graphs illustrate how far they move. So each of those donut rings or concentric circles represent 100 kilometers out from the natal site where they were hatched and fledged from. And then the red circles are how far they've moved. And then the compass shows you the direction. So there's not much you wouldn't expect. There's no bias moving north or south, really. There's a slight east-west bias if you squint your eyes and look at it really hard. And that's because Victoria is sort of a squished left-right kind of state. So that makes sense to me. The males, however, it's noticeable. There's only one that we found that ever moved more than 100 kilometers. So there's a big bias in how much farther the females on average will move compared to the males. And it is statistically significant. We did assess this. And this disparity in dispersal reduces the likelihood of inbreeding. You'll get less chances of inbreeding if the females are dispersing further and the males are staying closer to home and adopting a nest less than 100 k's away, or on average less than about 30 kilometers, whereas the females on average are moving about 60 kilometers and a lot further. So this is a great way to reduce the amount of inbreeding that's going on, and it's fairly common for a lot of species, not just birds. So I think, how are we going for time? We have done really well for time, so I'm happy to open the floor to questions. This is a female who's not very happy with me at the time of this photo. This is down at the Anglesey Alcoa coal mine when it was in existence. And yeah, the attitude and the pose says it all to me. She's not scared. She's really ticked off, and it's me that she's ticked off with. So yeah.
You've got a lot of angry birds out there after you, Victor.
Yeah, I do seem to attract them. There is that. Is it just me? Coincidence? You be the judge.
Well, thanks very much for that, Victor. That was fascinating. We've got quite a few questions. I won't ask all of them because I don't think we'll have time, and some of them have already been answered by you tonight.
I hope so.
Yeah, very thorough. Thank you. That was great. One of the questions is, why have the females evolved to be bigger than the males?
Well, all birds of prey do this, all raptors, not just peregrines. The difference in size, that dimorphism, there's a dimorphism index that's been developed. That index is larger for raptors who hunt fast-moving prey. So it's really highly developed, this dimorphism index, amongst peregrines, because they hunt things that fly. There's not many things that move faster than things that fly. One speculation is that the male can hunt sparrows and starlings and small things that the female has difficulty catching because she's not as nimble and maneuverable as he is. However, at the other end of the scale, she can bring in a black duck, and other larger prey that he can't tackle. So you can, as a species, you can hunt a wider range of prey because your males and your females are so different in size. So that's one theory, and for tonight, I think that's probably complicated enough.
Sounds good. Thank you. Now, why are the Collins Street falcons nestlings not banded?
We stopped large-scale banding some years ago, and I think largely because I've answered most of the questions that I was really interested in, and I've had trouble since trying to come up with another question. So I didn't ban because I like banding. I banded because I thought it was the most efficient way to answer a question. And one of the questions was, where do they disperse to? And what sort of nest do they choose? And do they imprint on where they're born? So banding was a mechanism to help us, so I don't, people look at banding and they think, oh, isn't it like playing golf or something? It's just what you do. It's a hobby. And it's like, well, no, as a scientist, even though I'm an amateur doing this stuff as a volunteer, it's just a means to an ends, and I don't want to ban right up to the last day of my life. Yeah.
I guess it's dangerous to ban them as well. You're taking a lot of risks. So
it's dangerous for me.
I mean, for you, yeah, not for the birds.
Yeah. Not so much for them. They're temporarily unhappy. They never thank me, yeah.
Thankless job.
Yeah, next question.
Okay. Everyone's asking questions now and it's going too quickly.
That's okay.
Sorry. Is the number of eggs that are laid related to the amount of available food? The Melbourne site has 4 eggs, which quite regularly. So
yeah, I think there are 2 things going on. Yes, they'll produce more eggs in either good seasons or good territories with a lot of prey. The other thing that is a phenomenon that's been observed is, and I haven't gone into it in this talk, or we could do it another time maybe, it's a bit more theoretical. Sites that only lay 1 egg, they often fail. So often there's not enough resources to produce more eggs. So, and the other thing that I've found is sites where we've improved the drainage and the protection from the elements. We've put in a nest box with a roof, or we've put it in a cliff face where it's protected from the weather. Same site, same territory, everything's the same. I'll find that the clutch size will increase, and this is a female responding. It's thought that the female's responding to the better quality of nest. So that's a bit contentious because things like wedge-tailed eagle nests can have 4 eggs, quite readily, which speaks they're not that protected, but they drain really well. So it sort of doesn't matter that they're not protected. So there's those 2 theories sort of competing a bit. Is it just because you have lots of food and you do really well, or is it also partly a response of the female to, it's worth investing in this because it's got a roof, it's well drained, it's better protected, so they're going to do that. These things are theories, and I'm not interested in getting hot under the collar of arguing or defending one or the other.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay. And do you see a difference in incubation with weather, such as does the female spend more time incubating in colder weather?
We haven't drilled down to that level of detail yet. My gut feeling is she probably would. Yeah, that would need a couple more years data, and we'd have to go back through. We've got data from the bomb, so we could correlate those. Makes sense. So yeah, but I haven't actually dug down to find out a yes or no answer.
Okay, thank you. Where and how do the Collins Street birds get water, and how do you think they'll be affected by the extremes of heat predicted this year?
Yeah, okay. All peregrines get their water from their prey. including the young. So they don't need to drink. In captivity, they will bathe daily, and they might, ingest a gulp or two of water, but broadly speaking, that's not a thing they have to stress about. They're very good at conserving water, and the young don't need any supplementary water. They just need to be fed.
Okay, that's good. Sorry, some of these questions have been answered.
And a lot of them will be answered in the Falcon fact sheets at the Facebook group over the season as well. If we don't get to them all,
as well, isn't there?
That's right. Yes, if we don't get all the answers tonight, if people are joining that group, they can get them there too.
That's good.
Over the season.
Someone was saying they enjoyed watching the webcam during lockdown. What time of the day would you recommend accessing the webcam for some action?
Mornings, anywhere from sun up through to 11 o'clock. Birds are more active then. The prey are more active then, so they're going to be hunting and bringing in prey. Generally, they tend to calm down in the afternoon, as do all the birds. Lots of feeding in the mornings, so I'd recommend morning viewing. Yeah.
Okay, good. Have you identified if the birds are Collins Street the same pair as last year?
Yes, I can for the first time tonight announce that we've got the same male and female. So they were both new last year, and he's stepping up better this year than he did last year. He didn't incubate at all last year because he moved in halfway through incubation and chased off the resident male, who was, I estimated, about 8 years old, which is to anthropomorphize it to the hilt here. That was a fairly wimpy thing for the resident male to do. Normally they it's a high risk strategy to try to take over a peregrine falcon nest site because they'll just kill you. There's no prisoner abuse scandals. They'll just kill you. But for some reason last year, the two of them were tolerating each other. People said, oh, they like each other. Oh, no. They don't like each other. They just don't seem to have the cojones to kill each other. And then eventually, halfway through the incubation period, the resident disappeared for good. And we don't know what happened to him, whether the new one did actually finally kill him or whether he just took the hint and said, oh I'm just going to go somewhere else. Yeah.
So do you think that the new male didn't incubate as much because he was young and he hadn't learned that yet?
Young and clueless.
Okay.
He literally didn't know what to do. A couple of times he stood over the eggs and it's kind of like, well, that's sort of incubating, isn't it? And then he'd kind of look around really confused, and then kind of wander off and go, oh, nah, I'll let the missus sort that out. It was just very, he just, and I'm anthropomorphizing really badly here, so people are going to have to forgive me. Animal behavior is one of the worst things in the world to study. I send them forms on Twitter all the time, and they never get back to me.
That's Falcons here. Make life easy, wouldn't it?
Well, Falcons here Twitter, and all they can think of is food, so that doesn't work.
I think someone's asked if peregrines hunt seagulls.
Yes, I think they taste like stale chips, so they don't like them. And I think the female last year refused a seagull that the male brought in. He had to go off and get something else. They don't take them as often as you think they might, given how common they are. And I suspect it's because they do taste like rubbish, but I'm not speaking from personal experience here. Yeah, they occur, and they do occur in the nest as prey items, but nowhere near as commonly as I would have thought, given how common they are.
Interesting. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us tonight, Victor. I'm sure everyone learnt a lot of new things. And
you're really welcome. It's such a Melbourne story, and you're talking about lockdown. People got very invested in this because, let's face it, they didn't have a lot else to do. And I I was always taken aback by the couple of messages I got from people who worked in ER wards saying how grateful they were to have this to sort of focus on and focus some of their patients' attention on, and it really touched me that this was seen as quite a service, and it is a public service in the sense that it's volunteers doing the thing, and no one's here to make any money out of them, which is great, I think. Yeah, so and it always has been a big Melbourne story each year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that people got quite attached to them over lockdown.
Yes, yeah, and as a scientist, we don't name the chicks or the adults on the site at the site. People can do it one in their own time, but there are two reasons for that. One is, when you've banded 2,500 of these things, you do run out of names. So it's easy to, red number 23. It's easier for the database to manage that. And secondly, if you start naming them, people who have pets will understand this. You get very attached to them, and then, when they start turning up, dead, as many of them do, it just becomes an unnecessary emotional toll. When I want to be focused on how can I conserve the species, how can I improve their conservation status. So it's just a matter of scale. So I just haven't taken to the habit of naming them for all those reasons.
Sounds very sensible. Well, I don't know what we'd do without you putting so much time and effort, especially in your own time, not being paid for it, and the volunteers on the Facebook site. It's amazing. So thanks once again for your time tonight, Victor. There's lots of thank yous coming through on the Q&A. So
Lovely.
everyone's really appreciated your time, and thank you everyone for attending. Have a lovely evening. Thanks, Victor.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.